Hello and welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Wendy Yi.
I'm Chris Yi.
And today we're going to be reviewing Votes for Women, a Fort Circle game.
This is from designer Tori Brown, who I believe is her first design. Fort Circle Games had published one game prior, The Shores of Tripoli. Now this is a historical game. It could be kind of lumped in with like the war games, even though this isn't about war. This is about
getting votes, swinging states to your side.
Yeah, ratifying a new amendment to the Constitution. I say new in the year 2023, but ratifying another amendment. So we're going to show you how it plays, then we'll give you our thoughts. Here's an example overview of Votes for Women. This game is played with either a suffragist player or suffragist team playing against an opposition player or opposition team, or solo or cooperatively against an oppo bot, which would take the role of the opposition player, where you'll simply flip over a card and then do what it says on behalf of that. So you're always playing with a suffragist team against some sort of opposition. The suffragists are trying to pass the 19th Amendment, which takes 36 states to ratify it. So 36 check marks have to come out onto the map, and each state has to vote for that. Or if 13 of the nays, the X's, come out, then the suffragist players will lose because that is not enough to get the supermajority to ratify the amendment. So the suffragists have to get 36, the opposition only 13. The way that this is done is that each player will have a hand of cards. I'm going to teach you the 1 versus 1, for example, here. And the suffragist player will get to play one card from hand and get to do either the event that is written on it and with its effects, or they can play a card to gain buttons. Buttons are going to be a currency used to move your campaigners around the board or reroll dice if they don't work out very well. Or you can campaign. You roll these 4-sided dice, and then you get to put out that many of your influence cubes in states within the regions where your campaigners might be. Or the last thing that you can do is that you can petition Congress, where you roll dice, and if you are able to roll any 6s on your die rolls, you get to add more of these pillars out here to Congress. When all 6 of these have been added out, that is when the 19th Amendment has gone through Congress and needs to be ratified by the states. Therefore, any states at this point that have 4 influence cubes for it, like New York over here, would get a check mark, and now that can no longer be swung either way. However, any states that have 4 opposition cubes immediately become a nay vote and cannot be swayed either way again. If at the end of the 6 turns or the 6 eras of the game, this is not met, the suffragist players will automatically lose. But if 36 or 13 votes have not come out, then the game will enter a final roll-off phase where players will begin to select states and roll dice against each other. And whoever wins in the outcome of those votes with the higher die rolls, plus the amount of influence cubes for or against that die roll, then those results will affect where the vote goes. And so once again, the suffragist players have to get 36 states in favor of it. The opposition player plays the exact same way. If you're playing humans, you can do the same types of actions, where you can either play a card for its event, or you can campaign with your campaigners against it, putting out your nay influence cubes. You can get buttons, or you can try to remove these pillars here from Congress by rolling against it. Now, once all 6 pillars have been put out, then you cannot repeal it at that point. It has to be determined at the state level. Some things about the event cards that you'll notice that some of these have ongoing effects that will affect ongoing cards that you or the opposition might play. Some of them even have effects here that will sit out for the final roll-off phase to help mitigate some of the luck. But the game can end before the end of the 6th turn if one player is able to influence enough states. Now, the way that the Oppobot is played is that after the suffragist player goes, you'll simply flip over the top Oppobot card and carry out its effects. If its effects can't be done, then the Oppobot will do some campaigning, where you'll roll some of these dice. You'll determine in the 4th region, the 5th state, the Oppobot player is going to move there and campaign for 2 influence cubes. And that's going to try to do it that way. Now, there are a couple of other things that I won't go through all the detail of explaining. You can bid for these strategy cards, which are huge for helping your side. You can win state cards if you're the first person to put 4 influence cubes in the state. then that player will get this and can save this for a later round. And so the strategy and the stake cards are more ways to kind of control what's going on. As I mentioned, if you don't like die rolls, you can spend these tokens here to re-roll your dice on actions or at the end of the game. And it's about trying to ratify that amendment. So there you go. That's Votes for Women.
So, Chris, I'm not normally someone that wants a ton of extra stuff in my game box, but the stuff that came in this is really interesting. I mean, we've got a headline, like a copy of the New York Times from the year or the day that it was ratified, which is interesting.
You got some information, historical information, telegrams and such, letters from the president of the Standard Guano Company writing to President Wilson at the time. Dear Sir, maybe I don't know much about writing the president, but that sounds like a rude introduction. It is well known in America that every American woman, has more rights than any other woman in the world, and to set this firebrand loose, said in context, loose is certainly criminal on your part. It's so interesting to see just how much historical research went into all of this that
so much.
They included all of these different like historical kind of recreations and stuff, like I said, telegrams and
speeches, letters, articles, yeah.
Yeah. So this is clearly not just set dressing. This is a very thematic game, as a lot of historical games really are. Well researched, well presented, and I think that it really makes an effect on the impact of this game. You could play this game as a head-to-head card game, and you play against each other. And I put out some cubes because I played this card, and you played that card that takes away some cubes and puts out different cubes. You can just play it that way, which I think is probably a little bit of a disservice to what a cool production, what a cool design this is.
Because the main way to play this is cooperative, right? That's their like sticker on the box main way to play. That's why we played live. When they came.
So one of my complaints about this is, okay, so to clarify, this is both a cooperative game, or a competitive game, or a solo game, or a team versus team game, or a one versus team, or team versus one. Like, there's a lot of ways to play. One of my I have a few complaints about the game, one of which is that the rulebook is not the most clear. It is effective of a rulebook. It works, but it is a little bit less clear. And then playing the cooperative mode, which I suspect is going to be many people's preferred way of playing this, is kind of a little addendum in the back. The normal way of playing this is a one versus one. You're playing the opposition.
Really?
I'm playing the suffragists, or vice versa.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was taught this by the publishing company, and so that we played the cooperative version. I assumed that was the standard in the book.
And it's not the standard in the book. And I kind of suspect that'll be probably the most common way that this is played, because most people are gonna. I think more people will feel a little bit odd, playing the opposition side of the game. Like, no, don't vote.
Sure, but there's plenty of World War II games where people play Nazis.
Right. So. And so that it begs that same thing. If you're playing a historical game competitively, one of you is going to be playing a side that you're probably
bad guy,
less comfortable with. I personally enjoyed playing this both ways. I liked the competitive version, the one versus one, and I thought it was pretty good. But I think that as a cooperative or as a solo game, this is kind of stronger, because it's fun to play against the systems in place that kind of feel like systems of holding you back and holding you down.
I think that's the thing, is so much politically is tactical. And so making this a very like cooperative tactical game, it feels like you against everybody else. And I like that. I like that it feels thematic.
Sure.
Of like, we are both working together as a group to try to get people to vote our way.
Right.
So I like that. Now, I don't really have a history with war games.
Sure.
Like, I know you've played a few, but I'm not a big history buff. I'm not one of those people that's like, yes, this is my game. So it surprised me how much I did enjoy this.
In fact, you're against women voting, right?
100%.
You told me as much.
Yes. No. Great, thanks, Chris. But coming from the background of not being as fascinated with the history, I appreciate how much this made me interested in the subject.
Yeah, I think that
there's a lot on the cards that you can read or you can choose not to read, but then there's a lot involved in the way that certain amendments and stuff as they came out affect the gameplay, which is interesting.
Right, there are cards that are just instant events, and then there's the ongoing ones that affect the whole turn, which is another one of my little complaints about the game, is that they use the terms round and turn
backwards from what we typically expect.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yes.
So a turn is multiple plays back and forth of cards until you run out of cards in hand to play functionally. That's weird. So anyway, there are cards that sit out for a whole turn of the game, and they're going to affect things. They're going to make your die rolls better. They're going to make you better at doing these things. They're going to make it more expensive for the other side to do certain types of actions.
So like short-term bonuses.
There's ones that have like ongoing effects for the rest of the game. So cards that say, hey, is the 18th Amendment in play? If so, then the opposition has a stronger case to make with certain of their event cards. And so as different historical things come up, it affects another player's ability, or the opposition deck, the Oppobot, ability to kind of affect you and what's going on. I like that.
One thing I really like about the card play, so one is that those amendments that stay out, they affect so much, but they're also really strong.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of stuff. You are very incentivized to play these permanent out there cards that make the Oppobot a little bit harder to deal with. But you're so incentivized. You're like, this is the way that we're going to ratify this. Like, we're going to make this happen. Bam, I get a lot of stuff. Oh no, bad. Like,
right. Is the Southern
we've got
strategy,
more opposition.
Yeah, is the Southern strategy in play? And you're like, yes. Then, like, no, Oppobot, no.
Yeah. So
I did that to myself.
I really like that, and I also think that the action decisions on a turn are very fascinating. Because every single card that you have has something on it, and it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, there's that choice of, ooh, I really need to campaign in a certain area, but I have to lose one of these card abilities.
Which one am I going to burn?
What am I going to give up? Am I going to give up something that gives me buttons and maybe not quite as many cubes, but I get buttons? Or am I going to give up a card that gives me a ton of cubes, but not in states that I really need them right now? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just such an interesting choice of that kind of multi-use aspect of you have to spend a card no matter what you do. So how are you gonna play that?
Yeah, and you have one card that you can hold on to from turn to turn. Mm-hmm. I hate that, and honestly, I know I'm harping on kind of a silly point, but it did make this rule book harder to understand.
Yes.
If you go into it not knowing that round means a single action you play, and turn means a series of 6 rounds.
Because that vocabulary is even used in the cards.
It is used in the cards, it's used in the rule book, so you have to know that. Anyway, so that made it a little bit more confusing to learn, but once you get the flow of the game, it's very simple. And
it is written on the board, the turn tracker. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense.
The first time I played the solo, though, I was like playing a card, moving the turn tracker. I was like, is this right? No, it's not. The Oppobot, how do you enjoy playing against that deck of cards? It
reminds me of Pandemic in the sense of like it's completely random. You don't know what's going to come out. Mm-hmm. But I think that it simulates what I want it to simulate well.
And cleanly.
It's very clean.
I think relatively clean.
Not a lot of upkeep. I take my round, and then I draw a card and I read it. You take your round, you draw a card and you read it.
Yeah, and you do that until the end of the turn. So, once again, I know we're harping on this, right? I have one more complaint. I think this is a fairly big complaint.
Is it the dice?
No, actually.
Oh, okay. I have a complaint about the dice.
No, so this is a U.S. historical game, right? It takes place in the United States. Mm-hmm. It is about U.S. history. If you are not quite familiar with U.S. geography, I think this game will be very difficult to play, part of which being, as you saw in the overview, the states are written on the board here only using the state code,
yes.
Right? The 2-letter codification. And if you are not familiar with that, there's not really indication on the cards when they affect a few states or something like that. But it'll just read out the words Kentucky, Nebraska, Missouri. Mm-hmm. If you don't know that MO is the state code for Missouri, that's going to make it difficult for you.
That's going to be hard,
There's a lot of U.S. states that start with the letter M, by the way.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so, and I complain about this. We've complained about this in other games.
That's a functionality
set
issue.
in different continents and different countries. That is a little bit of a functionality issue. I'm pretty good at geography, and sometimes I'm still like, crap, Missouri is M-O. M-O is the state code, you know what I mean? So even for me, very familiar with the states, there's a few moments where I trip up.
Yeah, and I've always struggled with the New Englandish area of the map. Like, it's just tight. It's intense. My complaint is the die rolling for the Oppobot towards the end of the game. because once you permanently lock in the votes of states, you can no longer add cubes to a state that's going, it's not voting anymore. It's essentially done. It's locked in. And so you have to constantly roll these dice. You're rolling so many dice to try to figure out where the Applebot can play. And I wish that it was a cleaner system.
We started. I think this is a house rule. What we did was, because you roll a die for the 6 regions, and then which of the 8 states within that region.
So and then how many cubes come out?
And then how many cubes come out. So we would roll them, and if the 4th region, 6th state, was already locked in, from reading the rule book, it sounds like you grab the dice, you roll again. And like you said, as you get into the end of the 6th turn, a lot of states might be locked down, and so you're just sitting there rolling for a while. So we eventually rolled, and it was just like the region die. Like, okay, it's going to be in the 4th region. Which state is it going to be? State 7 or state 8?
Yeah.
And then we just roll the state die from there. That'll make it easier for you.
And I could honestly even be okay if because there's a different amount of sides on the die depending on whether it's the state die or the region die or the cubes die. Mm-hmm. I would be okay if those were better distinguished as well. Because throughout the game, I was like, wait, which one is the cubes amount and which one is the region?
Oh, I don't know. I was fine with that.
Yeah.
But I was also kind of running it most, so I was very familiar with it.
And so I think that's the thing, is I was like, okay, I definitely got the D6. But the 8 versus the 12, they kind of look the same.
Right. So I made a few complaints about the production, just a little bit of like the usability, the learning, the state codes and stuff. Other than that, I'm really, really impressed with the production of this game. The pieces are great. Mm-hmm. The campaigners, those meeples and stuff. They went with nothing but women for the suffragists and nothing but men for the opposition, and even the company admits, like, we're using visual shorthand, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, they clearly know, and they clearly included a lot of historical research showing that there were, and even some of the cards, there were women's organizations that were against women's suffrage at the time. And it's fascinating to read those cards as you're playing them out. If you're playing the opposition side, it feels, for me, almost humorous. I laughed at some of the cards that I was playing out because I'm so far removed from that mindset. It feels so absurd
to think that way. Yeah.
But I love that it had both a gameplay purpose and also, like, I care about the flavor text going on in here. Mm-hmm. The pictures and everything that are used for each of the cards as you're playing them out, the flavor text, the historical information going on is great. I think that ties so well the theme and the mechanisms going on in this game. The dice, I think, are really well produced. There's lots of different colored dice for different purposes. The cards say square 6 means roll a 6-sided die. Got it.
They had a lot of 4-sided dice that were 1 through 4, but they were actually 12-sided dice.
Which
makes it easier to roll.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that. More companies feel free to use cool 4-sided dice, like, 1 through 4 repeated 3 times on a 12-sided die. Yes. That's more fun to roll. Yeah. More fun to pick up, too.
I think overall, this game, having really strong theme, it's a good cooperative game as well. Like, I think it's an interesting, good combination. So I'm going to give this a 7.5 because I like a lot of what happened and what went on. I would be okay if it was a little bit shorter. Mm-hmm. And I'd be okay if it was a little bit less fiddly with all the dice rolling for the Applebot. But the actual, card play of that extra thing, it works for me.
Okay. I'm giving this one an 8. I really like this. I think that this is a fun competitive game, even though I would give the competitive game probably the lowest score.
Which I didn't play the competitive game at all.
Yeah, I did. And I liked it still, but I think playing it cooperative and then playing it solo is probably solo is maybe even the best way, I would say, because you get that feeling of playing against the Applebot. You get all 6 cards in hand. If you play cooperatively, you each have, 7 cards in hand, play down to 1. If you play cooperative, you have 4 cards in hand each. Mm-hmm. And so you can talk about it kind of freely what you're going to do, but you're splitting up 1 hand amongst 2 players. I think it still works out really well, but if you're playing it solo, then you control both of the yellow and the purple suffragists, and you get to the whole hand of cards. You get to turn out you get to plan out your turns, rounds the best. So I think that this is maybe even best as a solo game, but I think it's just almost just as strong as a cooperative.
That's interesting, because I just wouldn't play solo. So for me, happy with cooperative.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so an 8 from me, because I think that this is a phenomenal production and really cool, really tense, and educational. We've done we've done a list. Mike Tom Z a few years ago or a few months ago did one called Top 10 Games for the Classroom, which is one that Tom Z and Sam had done years and years ago as well. And this is absolutely one of those that I would recommend. I think that this has a lot of
high
educational.
School level.
Yeah. If you want to talk about not just the history, but also a really great representative of like what a constitutional amendment takes to actually happen. The supermajority, the fact that the suffragist player has a higher threshold they have to meet to win.
Oh my goodness, when you see the pile of check marks versus the X's at the beginning of the game, and then even throughout the game, you're like, oh my gosh, like the opposition got 3 states.
Right, and we got 8.
That's like a third of their stuff.
Yeah, we just got 8, but they got 3, and I'm more scared of their 3 than my 8 makes me feel good. I think this is a really awesome representation of a lot of both governance classes, history classes. There's a lot of value that I see from this game.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Wendy Yi.
And I'm Chris Yi.
Let's go vote, ladies.